Hello.
Oh, good evening. Good evening. Love it.
Oh, it's like a nice energy in the room.
Very good energy. How are you this morning? Or this morning?
I mean, that's about.
Because what
right.
is time? What is time anymore?
What is days?
We're just days time.
I mean, how are you? I'm the same that I am every day. Like, just a little bit devastated.
Oh, a little closer? Okay, yeah.
I knew a feminist speaker who didn't like to do regular mics because she found them too phallic. And every day, I come closer to that, like...
It's a lot.
It's a lot. I'm like, I don't want this so close to my face. I don't.
I get it. I came up in hip hop, so I'm always like, holding the mic too close, too wrong, whatever. First of all, can I just say what an honor it is to be in conversation with you, Jessica. I mean, I have watched your career. I have listened to you. I'm just going to get my fangirling out up front, right? Because there's lots of folks here are going to want to do the same thing. But it is I have watched you be an incredible storyteller, a truth teller, a historian, a documentarian, an archivist, a linguist, a narrative specialist, and an activist. I mean, as I was pouring through and even I hope you noticed that even my tabs are pink because on Wednesday we wear pink.
Gotta do it.
That it is, it's such an incredible guide to the moment that we are living in right now. So I just want to get out of the way, like how honored I am to be here in conversation with you. And this is going to be a conversation. We've got lots of notes, but I don't think that either of us are going to be able to stay on script.
Yeah. That's okay.
Yeah.
But no, likewise, I mean, literally the first thing I thought on stage was like, I would like to have a round of applause for Alexis and Planned Parenthood, please. And for the work that you all are doing. Literally, like the second I sat down, I started to get like emotional immediately, thinking about everything that you guys are doing right now and how many people you are literally saving. And it's such a hard, devastating moment. But what you all are doing both on the national level and on the local level, I think really brings a lot of people so much hope and reminds us that we're not alone and that there are people who are doing this work every single day to make sure that people will be safe. So thank you.
Thank you. Well, I appreciate that. And we're going to try to keep those themes of hope, resistance, joy, the work, like all kind of present today. So I can, first of all, I just want to lift up abortion, our bodies, their lies. I love how you italicized their lies, our bodies, the truth that we use to win. Can you talk to me about how you came to both doing the Abortion Everyday column, which is, if you all are not subscribers, that is I'm going to give you a lot of jobs today because I'm a job giver. Thinking about kind of the work that people need to do, but talk to me about how you came to the column, how you came to the work, and then how that led to the book.
Yeah, so the newsletter started, it's funny, like every other person these days, I had a Substack and I had an existing Substack that was really just a place that I would put a weekly column, and then the news leaked about Dobbs and I was bereft. And then once Roe was overturned, as you well know, the attacks just started immediately, right? It was just immediate and constant and never ending. And I think to start with, I sort of started tracking things to help myself and to feel like, okay, I need to feel like I know what's going on. I need to feel some semblance of control in this moment when they are trying to take control away from us. And so I really just started to do it for myself. And then after a couple of weeks, I realized this is actually an ongoing project. This is something that needs to be done because the overwhelm is very much the point. The point is to inundate us so that we feel like we can't possibly fight back. We can't possibly know everything that's going on. And so the hope was to really create something that would make people feel like, okay, if I just take 5 minutes, 10 minutes and read this one email a day, I will actually feel somewhat on top of these attacks and know what to do next, right? And with the book, I mean, in part, it was the election. Like the book came out a few weeks before the election, and I was really hoping that it would sort of spark a conversation and help drive people to the polls, and it did one of those things. But it does feel like we're in this really specific moment, and I love the newsletter, and we're publishing so much every day, but then it's gone, right? It's like in your inbox and then it's gone, and like, yes, it lives on the website, but like I really wanted to have something that was a record of this particular moment and these particular attacks, because they are so specific to right now. But it's been a busy couple of years, as I'm sure you're feeling.
Just a little busy. Well, I mean, like you're getting at this point of documenting, right? Because like, and when you say, I just want to kind of capture this moment because it's going to change and we want to remember what happened in this moment, right? That is the process of archiving. That is the process of documenting. When we're literally watching documents leave the internets, right? From the White House. We're like literally watching things being taken down and narratives being kind of shifted automatically. Like, tell me about, like, as you're going through the process, how are you starting to identify the patterns? Because I think one of the things that starts to come through very, very early on in your work is like, there are all these weird patterns that are going on.
Yes, it's very much, the work is very much about trying to connect the dots, right? And trying to predict as many attacks and tactics as I can before they happen, or like just when they're at the start. It does, unfortunately, take a lot of combing through conservative media and listening to really unfortunate anti-abortion podcasts, which I do not recommend. Really terrible shit. But what is so interesting is they really do give up a lot. Like, if you are listening, if you are willing to listen to all of their nonsense, they are bragging. They love to talk about what they're up to. They love to, they won't put a press release out about it, right, but they do talk about it. And it feels like they're leaving us all of these hints in various ways and all of these clues and sort of this roadmap to what they are most interested in for American women. And I just want to make sure that, like, I'm there capturing as much as I can about it.
Well, and it's interesting because in your opening, when you're talking about the leak of the Dobbs decision, which is like, I think like May 3rd, I think, is etched in my brain. That evening, going home, kind of crawling into bed, thinking about your daughter and just being like, oh my gosh, what in the world? But you write about, it's not just about abortion, like the loss of abortion rights. It's a fundamental loss of our citizenship. Mm-hmm. Can you talk a little bit about that? And then like the connection, because I think you were a very early person kind of in the space in the movement to be making the connections between citizenship and democracy and where we are right now.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is what has been the hardest for me and the hardest to talk to my daughter about, honestly, right? She sees me do this work all the time, and I see her get worried, and I try to remind her, like, you're extraordinarily privileged, you will be okay, you live in New York. But to her, and I understand this because I feel the same way, it's not just about access. It's not just about, like, I will be okay and this person will not be. It's about that, like, soul-crushing feeling of living in a place that doesn't see you as fully human. Mm-hmm. And knowing that your humanity is up for debate, right? Like, I will never forget watching the Supreme Court, hear arguments over EMTALA, over emergency abortions, and hearing them discuss, like, what is the acceptable amount of organs that a woman can lose before a state should be forced to give someone emergency life-saving care. Like, the fact that this is a conversation, the fact that there's legal briefs being written about this, that our humanity is being debated in bullet points, is just so mind-blowing to me.
All the way up to, like, the highest level, court of our land, right?
Right, and it's not like...
Do you need that liver, or do you need that...
Right, and it's not... And that's what's so hard, too, right? That it's not... It used to be that you could sort of tell yourself that it's these sort of, like, outlier extremist maniacs who are over there. Like, they're here, they're in charge, they are leading this whole thing. And it's exactly as bad as you fear. And it really is that like loss of citizenship and personhood, I think, that is so difficult to live with.
Right. Yeah. One of the things I've said a lot on the trail last year, but just kind of in general, it's that, the thing that really hits me is that you don't take away rights from your peers, right?
Yeah.
If you actually value someone, if you believe that they are equal to you, you don't try to deny them access to rights. Like you have to dehumanize and you have to inferiorize and you have to ensure that they are not qualified and create all kinds of narratives and stories about why they don't deserve those rights in order to justify taking those rights away. And there's a whole process, literally, ironically, because you said taking away personhood, but there is a active process of dehumanization that is required in order to justify it under the construct of our democracy.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think what's also really frustrating and infuriating about it is we know that that's what that is.
Yes.
And they are presenting it as this gift that they are giving us, right? That like women actually really want to be able to have more children. Women really want to be in the home. And like, I think about all of this, like, I don't know if you are on TikTok and follow like all of the trad
Don't
wife
let me go
nonsense.
on TikTok.
They shouldn't. Stay off. But there's, like there's this big movement of like trying to get young women into being traditional trad wives.
Trad wives,
yeah,
yes.
The trad wife stuff and anti-contraception stuff. And it's all framed in this, under this guise of we're protecting you. We're protecting you and we're giving you what you really want.
Yeah.
And that to me is what is so offensive and so insulting and so infuriating.
So Jessica's talking about hashtag trad wives, so traditional wives, but it's TRAD wives. And it is like a series, sometimes I sneak on TikTok. So it is like a series of these memes, right? Or like, these women are like, what a man really wants? This turkey dinner. Let me give you this recipe. And like, they'll do a whole thing about just what it takes to be a real traditional wife. And, like I went to school, I have an education, and you know what? That is so great for dinner parties. You know what? I don't need to I don't really need to go off and become a professor of economics. I can have that conversation as I'm stirring my mashed potatoes, right? It's like this very weird kind of.
And it's a rewriting of history too, right? It's like this romanticizing of 1950s housewifery, like a version of 1950s housewives that didn't really exist. It's
retrofitting it into the degrees that we have. Yeah.
It's really, truly bizarre. But then like I think about Elon Musk and all of like the pronatalist shit that is going on. And it all just sort of like ties together in this neat, horrific little bow.
Yeah. Okay, we're gonna unpack that. So you mentioned Musk, and that's a little bit in the future. I want to kind of walk backwards in the future.
Let's not.
We're gonna end in the future. We got to end in the future. But like, I do think there is so you wrote this book. It comes out literally right before the election. We have a lot of different scenarios at play, and I think most of us on our bingo card had, maybe a mixed chamber. We had different ideas or hopes for who would be in the White House, but at best a divided government, right? I think that was probably the optimistic frame. So the book comes out. We are 2 years post Dobbs, living in this world. A lot of energy, a lot of outrage, a lot of ballot initiatives. So we're seeing it play out. What happens for you election day? Like, where does your mind go? How are you thinking about that? And then I want you to kind of go from there to some of the immediate flood the zone things that are happening. How are you seeing the story?
Really trying to re-traumatize me, Alexis. I was actually like pretty optimistic on election day, but only because I think you have to have some level of optimism to do this work. Like you have to feel like you are capable of winning in order to get up and do this work every day. And I think we all felt really good about the polling around abortion specifically and the polling around ballot measures. And there is certainly some debate about this within, the ballot measure community. But I think what we did end up seeing happening was that a lot of people felt like, they split their vote. They felt like I can vote to protect abortion rights, but I can also vote for Trump. And I think we saw a lot of white women voting for Trump and thinking that they could still have that pro-choice vote and that they would be okay. I cannot tell you the amount of messages and emails I got from people after election day asking me, I'll be fine. Like, even if there's a national ban, I'll be fine though, right? Because we passed this ballot measure. Like, I mean, and so on this basic level, I think that like we sort of failed to do sort of like a government 101 with a lot of folks. And I think that there was this misunderstanding that people thought that they could, you know, have their shitty orange cake and eat it too. I mean, and I think that that's in part what we saw happen, but it's really distressing to me, the Republican women's votes, the white women's votes, and I think in part because I hear from a lot of them, and I'm sure Planned Parenthood does too, and they're surprised. Like they're shocked when they can't get the care that they need. They're surprised, you know, when they can't get miscarriage treatment, and it's hard to feel like, well, we laid this out. Right.
Right. And we were laying it out. And I think, I mean, people were splitting their freedoms, right? They were voting to protect themselves in state. But the thing that I think was really confounding for us was how, like, the thing that should have been clear, but wasn't, was that people actually believed the then candidate, but President Trump, when he said, I'm not going to do anything about abortion, that national abortion ban, that's not going to happen, right? And so there was like a kind of overcompensation and desire to believe someone who has over and over again, you know, kind of at best quibbled on the facts and the truth, and they were willing to make that leap nationally while protecting themselves kind of internally.
Wild. That all of these polls showed that, like, Republican women specifically really did believe that he's not going to pass a national ban. He doesn't really care. I think there was a lot of feeling he doesn't really care about this issue that much. He's going to leave it alone. And also, unfortunately, I think the mainstream media, like, I hate sounding like, you know, I feel like a conspiracy theorist sometimes, but like, I think that the mainstream media's coverage of this, that every other day there was a headline saying like, Trump promises to veto national ban. What are you talking about? That's bullshit. That's absolutely not true. There was no context. And so I think a lot of the headlines that people were getting was that he didn't care about it. He did not have any plan to implement, you know, national restrictions at all. And they did a really good job, and this is something I write about in the book, with language, where they would say, we don't support a national ban. We support minimum national standards.
Yes.
That's the same thing. It's the same exact thing, right? Like and we saw this just recently when RFK, during his confirmation hearings, someone asked some question about abortion, and he said something to the effect of, well, you know, Trump wants to end late abortion. Okay, what does that mean, right? Like, one of the things I write about in the book is how they've been trying to redefine late abortion as anything now past the first trimester. And so if you're trying to end late abortion with a minimum national standard, what does that really mean when you decode it? It means we want to pass a national abortion ban after 12 weeks. And so if you don't know how to read between the lines, and why would most voters know that, then you are going to buy into it.
Right. And also, I'm not going to sign legislation knowing full well you're not very likely to get legislation in a very divided Congress, right? Like, even in your trifecta, it's going to take a lot for you to get actual national abortion ban legislation. So there may not be the case, right? But there's so many things that he could do by executive order, right? In terms of, you know, instructing the DOJ to enforce, you know, their version of what the Comstock law should be. So there are all of these ways in which there's kind of like a backdoor kind of leaving it open to actually ban abortion. I would say take on Planned Parenthood attack, a defund, right? Just defund a provider, a significant provider in the space that kind of create these opportunities to do a backdoor without actually doing the legislation.
Can we talk about that for a second, though, honestly, like the defunding move? Because I don't know that everyone knows about how serious this is, how targeted this is, because you all are dealing with a lot, right? It's not just the move to defund. You have like a case about to go in front of, not about to,
Texas,
but that will go in front of the Supreme Court. You have the Texas lawsuit. You're like, which suit?
How many?
Right, no, so Texas suing you guys for $2 billion in an effort to like completely obliterate and bankrupt the organization. South Carolina is going to the Supreme Court
to try to remove us as providers.
And then there's like just the broader defund. Can you just explain?
Yeah, so the number of attacks that we are under or that sit, like as a proxy, right? I think that we're like the top of the proxy fight around reproductive freedom and rights in this country and the provision of healthcare. So right after the election, we're all kind of processing our space. This new entity, the DOGE comes into play, the Department of Governmental Efficiency, that is apparently a new agency-ish being run apparently by Elon Musk out of the White House, out of the Oval Office, it seems. And he and then co-conspirator Vivek Ramaswamy actually write an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in December and talking about all of the efficiency plays they want to move in the government, and one of which is we want to defund Planned Parenthood, NPR, and Sesame Street, I think, right? Like those were right. So Elmo and abortion and,
Like in true villain form.
True, right, exactly.
No Elmo,
access
forced pregnancy.
Exactly. The access of good and that, right. So, right, all in the same sentence. And so obviously you see you're on the radar and defund is already going to be a thing. So when we say defund, Planned Parenthood health centers across this country provide healthcare just like other health systems. They provide healthcare, and the patients who come in, they are able to, some of them self-pay, and some of them are able to get their services covered by their private insurance or their government insurance, by their Medicaid in many cases. And so the effort to defund is about putting restrictions on Medicaid's ability or a state or federal Medicaid funding to go to Planned Parenthood. So the way that Planned Parenthood health centers stay in, are able to provide the quality health care that they are able to provide is because they are reimbursed for services provided, and the gaps between the expenses for that care are also covered by fundraising. So it's like a mix, right? That we are a critical part of the public health infrastructure. We are, in fact, and I was like talking to my team today about just the distinction between, being a part of the public health infrastructure, but really also understanding what a public health system is. And for many people, right, the public health systems have been deeply underfunded forever. They've also been subsidized in charity ways and by many Catholic hospitals that, support some of the most indigenous in our communities. And, the fact that we are a place where people can come and like truly be seen and destigmatized for everything that they want, to come in and be able to have the most intimate private conversations, the doctors, and get like incredible quality care. Like that's what we strive to do every day. But it is about pulling together the pieces of a strong, hopefully in some states, quality reimbursement and equitable reimbursement, and also strong support from a fundraising standpoint. That's actually what the model is, and their effort is to just take away all of the public funding and to say, no, you can just go to the charity hospital, or no, you can just go to, because again, to your point, like you don't deserve all the benefits of citizenship in this country, and you don't deserve all the benefits of taxpayer funding. So therefore, we're just going to strip away the access to 2 million people. So that's the defund. And then there are two cases. Well, one is a case before the Supreme Court in South Carolina around essentially trying to backdoor defund the South Carolina affiliate, but then also, we'll watch it scale across the country by literally denying the dignity of patients to choose who their provider is. To say, you cannot choose Planned Parenthood to be part of your public health system. We are going to deny you that right that almost every other American has. But if you use Medicaid, you are not allowed to go to a Planned Parenthood. And then the third case, well, there's many cases, but the third most significant one is a case out of Texas, or in Texas rather, in Amarillo. If Amarillo sounds famous to you, it's not just where Oprah went to defend herself against the Beef Ranchers Association, for those of us old enough to remember. It is also the place where Judge Matthew Kacsmaryk sits, in the only judge to sit in the federal district court. And it's this very convenient path because people come to Amarillo, to incorporate themselves, to kind of put whatever before his court that they want to fight. That case will then go to the Fifth Circuit. That Fifth Circuit, obviously very conservative, will go to the Supreme Court. So it's like a convenient, their own judicial bypass, as it were, straight to the Supreme Court. So what are they doing in Amarillo? They have charged Planned Parenthood's 3 affiliates in Texas, along with the national office that I run, with essentially a Medicaid fraud case, which is so baseless. It's so meritless. If some of you may remember, about 10 years ago, there was a sting operation where someone videotaped a doctor and spliced together. This is even maybe AI existed, but it was kind of pre-AI. It was just kind of in your junior splicing department. They spliced together, and took completely out of context what a provider was speaking about related to medical research. Medical research, by the way, that is kind of responsible for helping us understand Alzheimer's and other genetic abnormalities and other things that have been really important and life-saving. But they do this kind of bait and entrap kind of thing. They create a video, they throw it all over the internet and claim, all these horrific, outrageous things about what's really happening at Planned Parenthood, so to speak. And then the state of Texas uses that to kick Planned Parenthoods out of their Medicaid program. And then while we litigate, if you get an injunction to get back in, they're like, they come back, kick us out, and they're like, well, you should have known we were going to kick you out anyway, so we're just going to fine you for all of the things that you did in advance. So we're watching them use these systems, right, that they are now fully in control of, and weaponize them to, again, do everything they can to kick out, whether like they're having the full frontal assault on abortion, or they're just coming after the provider. So all those things are like literally what we are up against every single day.
Just a little bit. And I have to say, like, as you were talking about the video sting operation, just to remind people like how connected this all is. Right now, there are a bunch of states, some of them have passed this law, but a bunch are considering this law that would force public schools to show an anti-abortion propaganda video in public school classrooms. It's by the same people who did the spliced together sting operation video. Like, people who are known for misleading videos are now going to be creating the curricula for public schools, and not in sex ed classes, because you can opt out of sex ed classes. You can get your kids out of sex ed classes. You can't get them out of science class. And so it's wild, but that's how connected this all is, right? Same thing with Matthew Kazmierek, like hearing all of these other cases. And I try to remind people, the vast majority of people support abortion rights and support abortion access.
To give the stats, though, because like in your book, it's like so clear. Yeah.
I mean, it's 81% of people, like when you ask people, do you want the government involved in pregnancy? 81% say, no, I want no government involvement in abortion at all. And so you're talking about this like small group of extremist legislators, billionaires, activists who are bankrolling and creating this whole thing that voters don't want. Not even in red states, right? Not even in places like Tennessee, they don't want it. They want the abortion bans gone. And it's just this like incredible, and Planned Parenthood, the polling on Planned Parenthood is more popular than both political parties. I mean, truly, more popular than, Planned Parenthood is one of the most popular institutions in America. Pro-choice organizations are incredibly, incredibly popular. And it's just this lie that Americans have been fed, that this country is somehow split on the issue.
Totally like false equivalence, right? And polarizing. We're polarizing. It's like makes no sense.
Controversial, polarizing, split. Americans can't make up their mind. Like they're constantly fighting. It's just not true.
Right.
It's just not true. And like part of it again, like is that mainstream media coverage, frankly, but it's also like the polling and the way that they ask polling questions. Like you'll notice in a lot of polls, they sort of take on this Republican framework of asking people when they think abortion should be illegal, instead of asking, do you think that the government should be involved an abortion, right? Like immediately, once you're asking when should abortion be banned, you are coming from a place of accepting this idea that it should be banned at all. But when you actually ask these much more straightforward questions, you get into the truth of what people really feel.
And look, I mean, I see like we've been fed that over and over again, that this is the most polarizing issue that you could possibly imagine. You cannot talk about it. I remember 10 years ago, like no candidate would ever seek a Planned Parenthood endorsement. They would like, they would run, and, our beloved dear sister and friend and mentor, Cecile Richards passed away a couple of weeks ago. But I remember being with her with electeds who, would like meet her behind, like kind of on the Lower East Side in the, in the bar and be like, okay, here's what we're going to do when we get in. And they would like have this whole conversation, like Planned Parenthood was like this side hustle over here. And, and they were going to like figure out a strategy, but they never wanted to be seen in public. Like it was just, no, we can never be seen in public because that would be way too beyond to the fact that people now seek our endorsement, right? It's just like a revolutionary place to be in, knowing that they know they can't win, right, without a strong reproductive freedom. Even
Republicans are trying to sound as pro-choice as possible
and independent. Absolutely,
yes.
Absolutely.
There was I've written about this in the newsletter and in the book where when Republicans are running and they don't really want to admit that they are supporting a 12 or a 15-week ban, the way that they'll say it is, I support a ban. I support a plan to keep abortion legal for the first 12 or 15 weeks.
Yes.
Like that's how they frame it. I support a plan to keep abortion legal because they know how popular
being able to control your own body is. Yes. Oh my gosh.
Imagine
revolutionary. But okay, so yes. So popularity aside, knowing that yes, people actually do want to be free. That's a thing that we've discovered over and over again. And yet we are living in the question that comes up for me all the time is we're still living in a country where we are at a structural disadvantage, right, in many states where, you named it, where there's a tyranny of the minority that control the levers of power in these, in these state houses. And they are able to take these votes. No state is it popular to ban access to abortion. No state is it popular to criminalize providers, criminalize patients. And yet they're able to push the envelope because they can kind of create these laws with like complete confidence that their constituents won't run them out, right? So like, how do we see, like, what's the antidote to that, to the fact that we're actually living in a state, in a country with that kind of lock-in power?
It's so hard because I think that there's like the political piece and the reality, right, of like what is happening in these state houses. But I really do think that shining a light on so much of this stuff really does make a tremendous difference. And I think social media has also helped in this tremendous way. Like when there are these extreme bills that they used to be able to sort of, usher in without a lot of fanfare, people are finding them now.
Yeah.
Right? Like I write about the fact that 6 states, no, not North Dakota anymore, 5 states are considering legislation that would make having an abortion punishable as a homicide, right? And those states have the death penalty for homicides. And these bills have dozens of co-sponsors. Right. That is, like, we're talking about really extremist legislation being advanced in these states, and they think that no one is going to notice. And I think people are starting to, right? Like, I really do think that people are starting to, and it's becoming harder for, like, they're still trying, they're still doing it, but I think that they know that there are a lot more eyes on them.
Well, and if you're going to go through the trouble of actually creating very extreme legislation, then the question becomes, how are you going to enforce it? And we are, looking right now at a case, an extradition case out of Louisiana for a doctor who's provided medication abortion into banned state, into Texas and into Louisiana. I think it's in Louisiana is the case. Yeah. So a question around whether or not that under their law, it's essentially fighting against what we call a shield law, whether or not that doctor can be extradited from a state like Massachusetts.
Right.
Right.
And what's like crazy interesting to me about the way that they are framing this case, like every single Republican in Louisiana is saying, this isn't an abortion case. this isn't a case about it, but this is about coercion. Like, their claim is that this mother of a teen girl coerced her daughter into having an abortion. We have no idea if that's true or not. We do know that they did not charge the mother with coercion, which they could have. They didn't have enough evidence to do that. But they very, very badly want that to be the public message because, again, they know that arresting mothers for helping their daughters end pregnancies is extremely, extremely unpopular.
Right.
But they work really hard to find specific cases, right? Like, they wanted to find a case that they could call coercion. And this is where, like, I think the newsletter has been really valuable for me because in 2023, I started warning, hey, they're talking about coercion a lot. And they're putting out these papers saying, we really need to start to talk about coercion, and this is going to be the way that we get, like, these laws passed, right? And just being able to, like, follow those breadcrumbs, I think, can be extremely valuable because you can see it. Like, you can see what's happening immediately. As soon as they started talking about coercion, I was like, oh, okay, they got their case. Here we go. They've been wanting to bring a case like this to the Supreme Court, and they, all of these Republican governors were searching out their perfect case to get to the Supreme Court, and they found one.
Well, the thing that I think really blew me away in the right after the Dobbs decision was how much we knew it was a 50-year plan, a 50-year strategy to kind of unwind the federal protections for abortion. But where they found their inspiration was in Brown v. Board of Education versus Plessy versus, going back to, kind of the canon, right, of civil rights legal jurisprudence to help help them find a way to frame a states' rights argument and to find a way to actually, create what they would call equal protection. Can you talk a little bit about like the equal protection piece?
Oh, the equal protection. So this has to do with the states I was talking about that have these bills to punish abortion patients as murderers, right? And again, I write about language a lot in the book because they're obsessed with it, and so I'm obsessed with it. Equal protection almost sounds progressive, right? It's like we're just seeking equal protection, but they're talking about equal protection for fetuses, embryos, fertilized eggs under criminal law, so that if you have an abortion or if you have a miscarriage that they think was a little sketchy, you could be charged with murder because that is a full human being, right? And it just blows my mind that we're not talking about this all the time, that this is not like front page news all the time, that multiple states are considering the death penalty for abortion patients. This is a real thing that is happening with dozens of co-sponsors on these bills, and we are not talking about it all the time. I mean, and literally in Texas, like the Texas GOP platform has this written in that is what they support. And because one of the things that we see a lot is a lot of Republicans will say, those are outliers, that's extreme, we don't believe that. But in the meantime, they're taking these sort of like backdoor meetings with these guys who call themselves abolitionists, which is like a whole other conversation, abortion abolitionists who are lobbying for these bills. And they're doing a good job of it, right? Like when you have multiple states and dozens of co-sponsors, you're really doing a good job of it. And it just makes it so clear that this was always about punishment, right? Like they really want people to believe we're not trying to punish women. This is not about misogyny. This is not about hating people. This is just about protecting, life. Then why are you so desperate to give the death penalty to pay? I mean, it almost, again, it makes me sound crazy. But that is that is literally what is happening.
Well, I think what's important, and again, what I think is so critical about the documentation, not just in this book, but in your work, and really how you have been thinking about it, right? Is that, again, if you want to marginalize a group, if you want to segregate, separate them, dehumanize them, you have to go through a process, right? It has to start with ideas of who's worth and who isn't, right? Who's worthy of the right and who isn't. And there are a set of things that are going to go along with that where you think they should be. You have to, develop the language and the narrative in order to make it normalized so that people can receive it. Because you can't just say, Jessica, you're inferior, and I'm going to take that right away, because people would have a reaction to it. So you've got to like ease your way into that with language, and I think that's so important. And you have to have institutions, right? So these state laws, like laws are institutions, state houses are institutions, the judiciary is an institution, ways in which corporations are institutions, ways in which people kind of come in and out of the space to affirm, right, those laws. And then, you know, long after you've embedded those things, you still have a pattern of informal interaction that actually really kind of starts to police in a totally different way. And so it is not, I mean, I think a big part of the anti-abortion movement has not just been like the sting operations, right? It's actually been violence. Yeah. It's been kind of the horror. And you talk about, Dr. Tiller, in your close, you talk about the, you know, provider who's murdered, you know, Kansas. Like, you talk about just the ways in which I think in this moment now, we are seeing people even more emboldened in a space.
Oh, yeah. I mean, one of the first things that Trump and Vance did was, was give like free rein to anti-abortion extremists, right? Like, Trump pardoned nearly 24 anti-abortion extremists who were arrested for violating the FACE Act, which is like the federal protection for abortion clinics, people who broke into a clinic, did violence to staff members. Then they went the next day to the March for Life and said, you don't need to worry, you're never going to be arrested again. And that's a quote. They said, never again do you need to worry about getting arrested. Literally giving the green light to some of the most dangerous, violent people, saying, go for it, because they know it's that enforcement mechanism, right? And that's part of the reason, too, that they're going after abortion medication, because they hate the idea that someone can end a pregnancy in the comfort of their own home, that they don't have to go to a clinic to be harassed by protesters, that they don't have to be shamed. They hate that. They want that opportunity to punish and shame. And I think, honestly,
like, the power of the agency that comes with being able to do that in the privacy of your home too. Yeah.
And I think this is in part, you know, why they go after Planned Parenthood the way that they do, because you all are in communities, right? Like, you're the place in communities where people are going to get the care that they need, and they need to erase any sense of community support. It's the same reason that they are trying to incentivize people turning each other in for abortion, right? Like in Texas, they have these bounty hunter laws to financially incentivize turning people in. And it's the same reason that they're trying to replace Planned Parenthoods and, you know, credible reproductive health clinics with crisis pregnancy centers, because they want to destroy any real sense of community and care and support that we have for each other.
Okay, I promise we're going to go to some audience questions here. They are very, very rich. We're going to start to work in some solutions here, because I think we've detailed a lot of the ways in which. No, I think. Look, we have to actually acknowledge reality, because if we're going to move past the surreality that we are in right now, we're going to need to actually acknowledge at bare minimum what's happening and what their strategies are. So I'm going to move us a little bit into some of the solutions piece. But before I do that, because I said I was going to move to the future a little bit, but in this current moment, and you mentioned it earlier when you were talking about the kind of natalist or maybe nativist kind of narratives that are starting to come out of some of the advisors in the administration. Can you talk a little bit about what that means, and where do we see power in the counter narrative?
Yeah, I mean, I think like the most simple way to explain it is like more white babies, right? Like, that's what they're looking for. They're looking for more white babies. That's what they want. They won't put it that way. They'll put it like, we want to support families. We want to make sure that people can have the families and the children they want. But they don't mean that for everyone. They don't mean that for everyone. They only mean that for certain people. I wrote this week about a bill in Missouri where they want to implement a state-run registry of pregnant women who are at risk of seeking abortion, and then give access to that registry to worthy and fit parents, right, who want to adopt. And so to me, it is all part of the same thing, in the same way that it's part of the trad wife stuff and the anti-contraception stuff. They want certain people having more children and more workers, and to marginalize, you know, everyone else. And it's a pretty familiar script that they've put a really new modern bullshit screen on.
Right. So they want to use their power to curate, the society that they want to live in, that they want to see. I mean,
there's a reason Elon Musk keeps having all those babies, right? He thinks that is there
a reason why the other people keep having them? I'm not sure I understand that one.
And maybe that's the anti-contra. He's like, well, I got to make sure these bitches can't get birth control. Sorry. But it's these people really think that they have superior genetic material. It really is this very Nazi nonsense that's in their brains, and it's.
I think it's so important to name that's why I said, you think about ideas, institutions, and interactions, because the ideas are so embedded in inferiority and supremacy. We're not throwing around words like white supremacy or those constructs just for fun, right?
It's a real
it is
tangible
really
thing.
about the way in which it's kind of showing up in policy. So in relationship to that, there's a question about intersectionality and the importance of how we connect in this. And I'm the only second Black woman who is president of Planned Parenthood, second woman of color in that. In 108 years. So it's
Don't clap.
Exactly. And we're in a moment now where the majority of reproductive rights organizations are now being led by women of color, which is a huge thing, and a majority of Black women. So we're in a new critical moment. I would say though that we still have a better but still fraught relationship with the reproductive justice community, and the majority of people who come to speak, to see the conversations, still don't always look like the communities that are most impacted. So can you talk a little bit about what you've seen around intersectionality and reproductive justice that's a big question, but yeah.
It's a big question, but I want to talk about what I'm seeing with the connection with trans rights, because I think we're seeing something similar play out where I think the mainstream reproductive rights movement is doing better with recognizing there needs to be an intersectional lens here. We need to have leadership that looks like the country. We're not quite there yet, but there is this understanding. And I think we're seeing sort of something similar happen with trans rights, where we're really not there yet, where there are still way too many feminists, way too many mainstream organizations that don't want to see that trans rights are inextricable from abortion rights, and that you can't talk about one without talking about the other. And you know that because you can see the way that Republicans are literally attacking trans rights and abortion rights, sometimes in the same bill, right? And the way I try to explain it to people is their attacks have always been intersectional, for lack of a better word. They know what they're doing and so our activism needs to reflect that as well. I am an eternal optimist again. I feel like you sort of have to be in order to do this work. And so I would like to think that we are getting there, but I think it's a process. I think it's an ongoing project, and I don't think there can ever be a moment where we declare this organization is now intersectional, this movement is now intersectional, right? Because it's not something that has a finite end, right? It's a constantly moving.
Yeah. Well, I agree. And I think you have to actually build infrastructure at the intersection, right? I think that too often in our politics, we engage in coalition building, right? We've got to win an election. We've got to win a ballot initiative. We've got to, get X done. We've got to get something in the budget. And so we come together and we create all kinds of compromises and deals in order to stay in the same space. And we're not going to talk about this. And this is what the language is going to be. And then we stay together in coalition. Yeah. And then the thing happens or it doesn't happen. And then we kind of go, maybe we do a little, autopsy and we figure out what worked and what didn't. And we've built some relationships, but we have actually not built the infrastructure to stay engaged in conversation in ways that really force us to do the work of truly understanding, are we centering the right things when we do this work?
I think that's a great point. And I think part of the problem, honestly, is that so much of this work is just defensive, right?
Yes.
Is just done with this urgency of holy shit, I'm just trying to get through the day. I'm just trying to make sure that like these 3 people can get care. I'm just trying to make sure that this one law doesn't pass. And that's deliberate. Like they're doing that deliberately so that we don't have the resources, the time, the opportunity, the energy to build those infrastructures, to build those coalitions in a way that, you know, is sustainable and is ongoing. And it's
and quite frankly, the luxury that they've had over the decades to really build, to you know, sit and review Plessy and Brown and say, I think there's an anti-abortion play in this movement, right? So there's another question here around the kind of global intersection in the fight, which I was on with a rapporteur in, I think, out of Norway a couple of years. I love saying a rapporteur. It was like so interesting. Like wrote this amazing white paper studying the anti-abortion kind of movement overseas, and he had come to understand that about $700 million annually was being spent raised from Christian nationalist groups here in the U.S., the Vatican, and Russia. And they were starting these local organizing groups all over Europe, and they were following much of the same model that you have talked about. So they were starting with teens, right, and the kind of education, the language, and then crossing state lines. I mean, Europe is one big state line, right? So it's like crossing state lines and what information could they get access to, and starting to build community around those things. That really is also like kind of mirroring the incredible right-wing kind of trajectory of their politics. And at the same time, you know, Ireland legalizing abortion, right? Mexico, right? You know, Ecuador, like we're seeing these like phenomenal spaces across the globe. Like, how do you reconcile some of those contradictions around what's happening in the global rights space?
I think in part, honestly, we need to have more joy. I think that in part because of this like defensiveness that we have, in part because of how difficult everything is feeling, and because of the way that we're being inundated, we lack that space to be able to think proactively and to feel that joy. Now, to be clear, like lots of abortion rights activists feel a lot of joy, and I think that they do a really good job locally, especially of building that. But I think if we can't get together like on a national level to really feel that and to feel hopeful, to feel like we can actually do this, that despite how overwhelmed we are, despite the way that they're attacking us on every front, that we can still win. We won't get anywhere if we just think that we're going to lose constantly.
Right, exactly. Well, talk to me about, I'm going to end on hope, but I do want to talk about, you know, one of the things that you say in your book is about, you know, like those of us who see this title and they're like, oh my God, this is my book. Like I'm part of the choir already, right? And I can talk to you for hours and hours about all of the things that we see that are going on. And you say, you're not just preaching to the choir, you're arming the choir. What does that mean for you? And what are the kind of to-dos that we need to engage in? How will you arm us?
Yeah, I mean, I think of it in a way where I came to this work as an opinion journalist, right? I came as an opinion writer. And I was never really of the opinion that I could change someone's mind with one column, right? I didn't think that I was going to write some column on rape or abortion rights and someone was going to read it and be like, oh, okay, I agree. But I did think that the people who were reading it would feel better prepared to go have those conversations with their dad or their best friend or their roommate. Like they would feel like, okay, I think I know what I'm talking about. She articulated this in a way that makes me feel prepared, that makes me feel knowledgeable, that makes me feel angry and ready to like go out and do something about this. And I really do think that's one of the best things that we can do, because I think the way that we change people's minds, or the way that we motivate people whose minds are already there, is on that personal level, right? And making people sort of like influencers and advocates in their own lives. I think one of the things that's been really cool for me about the newsletter is the community there and the people who read it. A lot of the audience is like people who work in legislative offices and cable news producers and reporters. But even folks who don't work like in this world are advocates in their own lives. They're people like, that's the person who, when someone is pregnant and needs to know how to get abortion medication, that's the person their friends go to, right? And so to feel like, okay, I am arming these people who already have this incredible energy and, desire to do something. If I can help them in any way that I can, then I feel like I'm doing my job.
So first of all, abortion every day is a commitment because it literally comes out like every day.
It's literally.
And when it does not come out, you also get a note as to why it's not coming out. Like that is Jessica's commitment.
That's my Italian guilt.
It is like, let me tell you, I needed a break, or I'm going to pass this off to my research assistant or whatever. But there is an expectation in the community that you've created that you're going to be there for them to arm them. And then you also are kind of creating the permission for yourself when you need to take that step back. The other thing that I'm sorry, like I told you, I'm like obsessed. But the other thing I really loved about the abortion every day is is it Friday when you do one good thing?
The one good thing thread, yeah. It's, things suck. And so we do like an open thread on Fridays that's just like, just tell me one good thing that happened in the last few days. Like it can be very big, it can be very small, it can be you got a promotion, it can be you had like 10 minutes to garden or go take a walk with a friend. It all matters. I want to hear every single bit of it. And actually, it's the best part of my week. It's great. And it's just all of these people sharing like some small thing that made their week a little bit better. And I just think, again, like the joy piece, like we need to hold on to that feeling of like things can be good, we can win, we can have joy and happiness in our lives and be there for each other and do this and not, totally melt down and fall apart.
Well, I was perfect kind of to this last question, which is how do you not just curl up into a ball and cry every day?
I do. No. Zoloft is number one. I mean, I'm not really like joking, but not really, right? Like I think anyone who does this work.
By the way, stock up before
before they cart me off to the wellness farm.
No, before HHS secretary gets in.
I know. I mean, I really do think anyone who does this work, right, whether it is like this is your life's work, this is what you're doing every day, or if you just care about this issue and you are it is hard. It is hard not to curl up in a ball every day and cry. And sometimes I do. I think that, the support of the communities that I have in my life, like online and off, are incredibly helpful. But I think like the overarching thing for me is just that it's not an option, right? Like who said it? Frig, I'm going to forget who said it. But someone said that, hope is a practice. It's not something that just comes. You have to work at it. And so I just make a decision that this work needs to be done, as I'm sure you do. This is what the moment requires. And so even though it's hard, you just do it, because what's the alternative, right? The alternative is just letting it happen. Like, no, that's not possible.
It's totally not an option. And I do think, I think it's a discipline, right? And it's an act of resistance, right? It is
exactly.
I think a lot about hopelessness being a luxury, right? That, I think a lot about the patients, like, and getting to represent providers. I hear so many patient stories every day, right? And I think sometimes to be the head of Planned Parenthood is to be the keeper of stories. And those stories are, when somebody tells you their story, it's an act of resistance because you've been stigmatized for so long, and to be able to receive that story, you're offering an act of grace, right? Because you're being able to bear witness, and that spirit in between the listening and the giving is so important to understand hope in a very tangible way. That the people who are getting off work in I don't know. Laredo, Texas, who, left their hourly wage job, and they got to get in a car and they got to drive 15 hours to Denver to get an abortion, and they got to be back in time, for their next shift to start. The only thing that is fueling that car is hope. They've got in the car with hope that on the other side, someone was going to be there for them. And to think about through all of those long hours, the thing that is fueling them is hope. and knowing when they get there, they're going to get what they need and then they come back. Like, and I think like if they don't lose hope on that journey, I can't lose hope on that journey. You can't lose hope. And like, it literally is our job to hold hope so that they can hold hope too. And if we don't kind of keep that as our fuel and as our momentum, you know, along with the joy, like, I'm so glad that you brought joy into this space, because you know, it is a beatdown, right? I mean, it is like to take on something for our generation. I mean, I think I'm maybe in the same generation, but like, I think for us to take on a fight that we long thought was settled, that we long thought, you know, we were just earning the benefits from the people who fought for us, and to take on something that is so like fundamental to our agency, to our daughters and everything else. It just is so meaning. So what I heard from you today, from an ideas standpoint, and I think what you really do arm us with in this book, is the ability to challenge the narratives, offer the counter narratives and the ideas that are kind of grounded in, to kind of take action in all of these various institutions, where whether it's an election cycle, it's a protest, it's a standing, you know, escorting a protester through, you know, and then to really like engage in that kind of informal conversation, whether you're on a plane or whatever, because like abortion every day is happening all around us. And while you're documenting like the craziness that is happening, it really is happening all around us, and we have to be attentive to that too.
I love that. That's really good.
Well, it's because I read the book and I was like, I know, it's like I'm such a student. I'm so honored to be here with you. Do you want any last words with the folks?
No, I just wanted to say thank you all for being here. I actually did want to end with a story, because in thinking about hope and what we do and how to remain hopeful. There's a story I tell now that it always helps me, and maybe it'll help you all. But I went to Florida a few months ago, right after they enacted the 6-week ban, and I was doing tours of abortion clinics and meeting with some of the activists down there, and it was a really, really hard day. And I was doing a tour of a clinic, and because the ban had just been enacted, it was very, very empty. And they took us, you know, in the waiting room. There's no one there. They're sort of showing us through the exam rooms. No one is around. And then they brought us all the way to the back of the building to this like very small, cramped room. And when we walked in there, it was just maybe a dozen and a half young women, all on the phone, all wearing headsets, making phone calls, booking bus tickets. You know, one person was texting someone emotional support because they had never been on a plane before and they needed to leave the state. And I feel really fortunate to get to do this work, and I see lots of, you know, inspiring stuff every day. But for whatever reason, like, that room absolutely shook me, and like I broke down, because it was such a good reminder that like in every community, in every state, there are rooms full of activists like doing this work every single day to make sure that people will be safe at Planned Parenthood, at abortion funds, and it's just incredible. And I think that, you know, if you're feeling hopeless or if you're feeling despairing, just remember that there are so many people who have dedicated their lives, their time, their energy, their money to making sure that if you need care, you'll be able to get it. That to me is just incredible.
Absolutely. Please join me in giving a round of applause to this incredible author, Jessica Valenti.